time for Gene Shepard, humorist, after-dinner speaker, and recipient of the Mark Twain Award for 1976. Here's Gene.
I have a reminder here. Have you sent your gift to Shepard yet? Bring it up. How's that for chutzpah, friends? Come on, kill it. That's enough. That's enough out of that. Speaking of the approaching Christmas, this is a couple of days before Christmas. This marks one of my more important anniversaries. One of the very few actual victories that I have had in my professional career, a true victory. And it came about in a kind of an unstudied, inadvertent way. Completely inadvertent. I was hung on this girl. It happened in school. And her name was Eileen Akers. Now, you see, everybody... just sit there for a minute, if you're a male type, and close your eyes for a second. And think of the names of the various girls. Now, this is only a male thing. The names of the various girls that you had a momentary, fantastic crush on when you were in school. Can you remember their names? Well, there were three major crushes that I remember having in grade school. Major crushes that really got me. These names still have a magic mystery sound to them when you say it, And I remember Eileen Akers was always sort of mysterious to me anyway because she was up in the front of the room. And I was always in the back of the room. I was back with the S's. She was up with the A's. And she never knew that I had anything on. She never, as far as I know, never realized that I was hung on her. Well, she was in the Glee Club. Now, I had no more interest in the Glee Club than I have in taking up the study of the economic situation of Pango Pango. I had no interest whatsoever in the Glee Club. As a matter of fact, if anything, I had a negative interest in the Glee Club. Because I remember some of the most boring times I ever spent in an auditorium was when they would have an auditorium session and the Glee Club would be up on stage and would sing stuff like, "Have you baked a cherry pie, Johnny Belly?" They were always singing. The Glee Club was a real drag to me, and there were all kinds of real draggy people that were in the Glee Club. Well, Eileen Akers was in the Glee Club. And so one day, Miss Robinette, and it was in Miss Robinette's room that this happened, Miss Robinette announced that they were going to have auditions for the Glee Club. Well, of course, immediately Schwartz snorted. Flick threw up into his lunch bucket. And I, secretly, thinking, I'm going to get next to Eileen Akers now, see? I'm going to get next to... So I went down that night to the gym, and they were having auditions for the Glee Club. Now, the way they did it was Miss Nelson, who was the principal and somehow was connected with the Glee Club, Miss Nelson was sitting at this piano, And they would call kids up one by one, or a whole bunch of us sitting in these folding chairs in the gym, and she would call them up one by one, and you would stand next to the piano, and she would say, now, as I play these notes, you sing these notes. And so she goes, bong, 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 bong. And she'd say, now sing that note. And you go, And then she says, now, bong, 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 I felt like a fool. See, a whole bunch of kids are doing this stuff, so I figured, what the hell, the rest of the kids are doing it too. Well, there must have been 50 kids trying out for the Glee Club. And she's playing the piano, and Miss Nelson always wore purple dresses, I remember, plays this piano. Well, she finishes the whole thing. There's a brief huddle with Miss Mino and a couple of other teachers. When one of them got up and says, the following boys and girls will please stay in the gymnasium. The rest of you will be dismissed, and thank you for coming out here, and thank you for trying, but we only had 6 places open on the Glee Club, and the following will please stay. Guess whose name led the rest? Shepard, the non-singer. Now, the point I'm making here, I couldn't sing, but the motivation of trying to get next to this chick, Eileen Akers, was such that I even completely surmounted a total lack of talent. I just wonder. I was inspired. So I was chosen for the Glee Club. Now, first of all, this was embarrassing. Now I'm in. Oh, boy, you commit yourself, see, and I'm in. And I'm kind of excited. I'm kind of pleased about the whole idea, you see. And so this happened early in the year. This was like in September, you see. I was in the Glee Club. And so every week we would meet, the Glee Club. We would meet on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we would always let out the last period in school, and the Glee Club would meet in the gym. And Miss Nelson or Miss Bundy or somebody would play the piano, and we would do these fantastically boring numbers. We sang the worst stuff. I'll tell you the kind of stuff we sang. We sang, can you bake a cherry pie, darling Billy? I can bake a cherry pie. You remember that song? Unfortunately, I had a voice that was lower than a snake's Adam's apple. I sang the lowest, the deepest bass in the bass section. Now, I don't know whether you are familiar with most of the choral things that Glee clubs sing, or whether you're even familiar with the part music they sing. Well, the bass section sounds something like this. On every number, we would sing this. Everybody else is singing these, they're singing the melody. They're singing stuff like, can you bake a cherry pie, darling Billy? Well, what do you think the bass section is going? We're going, Billy. That's all we'd say. They'd say, have you bake a cherry pie, darling Billy? Billy. Another thing we used to do, we used to go, little front, let's how to, da 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 da. You notice I don't know the words? I never sang the words. The bass section goes zum, 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 zum. That was what we sang. What a dull part. And I'm way down at the end. I was so far away from Eileen Akers, who sang mezzo, coloratura, soprano. She was way at the other end with all these little tall, skinny girls were singing these high notes, and there were a couple of tall, skinny guys in the middle of all that, the kind of guys, very skinny, tall, and and they're way down at the other end, and I'm bugged now. I can't get out. It was a total flopperoonie. I was further away from Eileen Akers when we were singing in the Glee Club than I was in class. And we used to, every miserable Thursday afternoon, I would spend 3.5 hours going, zum, 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 lum, bum, bum, bum. Then we had another one. We did the Yankee Doodle Comes to Town, and it was all in fantastic part singing, except that the basses had nothing to do in that one, except that once in a while we would say, Yankee Doodle. And then they'd go, comes to town. Da, 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 da. We were the comedy relief in that one. We go, Yankee Doodle. Me and 2 other guys. Jack Morton was one of them. Me and Jack Morton and Freddie Martin, we go Yankee Doodle. We were the bass section. Well, it got to be kind of a drag. And first of all, I was figuring, you see, after the year was over, the end of the year came in something like January, February, right after the Christmas holiday, I was going to split, I'd get out of Miss Robinette's class. That's the end of the ball game, The hell with this scene. Well, little did I realize that I was destined for fame. I am so bored with the Glee Club, I can't stand it. Is there anybody out there that was in the Glee Club? You mean you really like it? You volunteered for it? The only reason I went for it was because of this chick. That's a fact. I've come to believe, seriously, that almost everything men do in this world is because of a woman for one reason or another. Do you think that's true, Herb? Do you think that's true, Jim? Well, I'm convinced. I'm really convinced. Well, I'll tell you, I was playing the Glee Club thing big. I had this green songbook that they issued to us, and I hated it. We used to sing Billy Boy, that business of Can You Bake a Cherry Pie, till it was coming out of my ears. Then we were singing things like The Little Brown Church in the Vale. Oh, another one we used to sing all the time was Way Down Upon the Swanee River, la-da-da-dee. You know that one? Groovy tune. Oh, yes. We used to sing Jeannie with the light brown hair. And, of course, the usual cheap jibbery-type humor that I got on that one. Jeannie with the light brown hair and all that stuff. Well, the Glee Club was a total bust as far as I was concerned. And I couldn't get out of it. I had to fake it through. 3 days before Christmas. It is now a Thursday. I can hardly wait for Christmas. You know how Christmas approaches when you're in school like some glacier? I mean, it's a giant thing. So, not maybe necessarily the holiday itself, but the fact there's a vacation, a Christmas vacation, the whole excitement of getting out of school. And in the Warren G. Harding School, Christmas was a big deal. Everywhere you looked, people are making Christmas trees out of green paper. Oh, I was cutting out Christmas trees. You're making ornaments. And those long chains you make out of paper that you glue together. And the whole business of taking popcorn and stringing it on strings. Oh, everybody's all excited. See, and right in the middle of it all, I got to go to this crummy Glee Club rehearsal. See, so I'm down at the Glee Club rehearsal. I'm dragging into the gym. Little did I realize a bombshell is about to be dropped right on the Glee Club. And the one thing I'm looking forward to is 2 weeks off. 2 weeks when I do nothing but shoot my kid brother with my BB gun. 2 weeks when I go out and break insulators with Flick and Schwartz. 2 weeks when, go skating and the whole bit. Well, I'm now in the gym. And we're all sort of fooling around. You know how just before something is about to happen, before a class, before a rehearsal or a practice, guys sort of fool around, hit each other, and, push around and yell and stuff. And we're banging around and hollering, and I'm showing off for Eileen Akers, you see. I still have a sad residual hang-up on this chick. I've given up, but I never really totally give up. So I'm hitting Jack Morton, and I'm watching her out of the corner of my eye. She's over by the piano. When Miss Norton comes in, and she takes her hands, and she goes on the piano and goes like this. Ba-bam! She makes a big chord like that. She says, boys and girls, now I want all of you to sit down on the floor for one moment. We have something very special to announce tonight before we begin rehearsal. And I have a surprise for you, too. And the surprise is this. We're not going to have a rehearsal tonight. We're going to let you out of school an hour early tonight. And, of course, everybody flips. Shepard with him, see. But now, just one moment now. Before we leave, I have a special announcement. I'll be quiet, all of you. And everybody sits down. What does this say? Because she had a look in the eye, like she's swallowed a cat or something, see? She says, I have just received information that one of our Glee Club members has been selected for the all-high school and the all-school Hammond Glee Club that will perform over the Christmas holidays and will sing on the radio. And I'm sitting there, I'm hitting Morton, and Morton's kicking me in the behind, and I'm spitting, And she says, and it is Gene Shepard. What the? You could see everybody turn, the whole Glee Club turns, looks at me and says, oh, come on. I couldn't believe it. It's the only time in my life that I ever was really picked for anything. And everybody leaves. Of course, a lot of yelling and hollering, and Jack Morton makes a couple of obscene remarks. And all the girls are looking. I was the only one picked. Well, Miss Norton comes over to me. I'm the last one in the gym now. I'm crushed. I can't figure it out. She says, I've just been notified. We submitted your name and 2 other people, and you have been picked. And we're so proud of you, Gene, that you have been picked along with 3 other students from George Rogers Clark and 1 from Columbia and 1 from Whiting, and you're going to be the lead in the bass section. What do you do? Well, do I have to tell you what happened? Right? It's Christmas, right? Guess where do you think I spent Christmas Eve? That's right. Me and 75 other kids wearing angel-type costumes with the long white robes, with the big stiff collars. They gave us white robes. And, all the girls, incidentally, in this Glee Club that we were part of, wore this light angelic blue robes. And all the boys wore white robes. And they gave each of us this long robe to wear. And for 3 days before Christmas, every afternoon I was left out of school. They allowed me to go out of school at 1, and I had to go down to the Civic Center and rehearse. Christmas comes. Everybody's running around having a groovy time. Christmas? Oh, no. Shepard and 75 other kids are standing on the steps of the Civic Center in the freezing cold, singing Silent Night to a large, ravaging crowd of 8 guys who are in between shifts at the steel mill. So, Christmas comes and goes. And for 4 straight days, while everybody else is out ice skating and playing hockey, guess where I was? Standing on the end going, Silent night, silent night, silent night. Bells, bells, stars are bright, stars are bright. And I had to survive the jibes and the unfriendly. You should have seen what Flick said about my robe. I had this white robe. Yeah, I remember him standing in a whole bunch of crowd of kids all watching us sing. And we sang on the radio. By the way, that was my first appearance on the radio. We sang on the radio, and I remember being fascinated by this announcer. Radio was such a big deal. And the announcer, local radio station, he's got this hair all slicked up, and he jazzy Tony Martin type roll collar, a real Sharpie type guy. And he says, and now from the steps of the Civic Center, we bring you live the all-school chorus and Glee Club singing a special selection of Christmas melodies. And then we played little chimes, and we started to sing. But that changed my whole life. Now, it really did. I've never forgotten that moment. That moment of being picked on something. For a talent that I had no idea that I possessed. And I was a good bass, actually. My voice changed when I was 5 and became a deep, resounding bass. And it's been that way ever since. And so, of course, I had an unfair advantage over all the rest of the kids. And even when I talked, my voice was always like this. And that moment, though, of getting picked, and I remember standing on the stage in the Civic Center on Christmas Day. They had this big concert. And everybody came. There must have been 2,000 people in the audience. And I remember my mother, my father, sitting down there, way down. I could see him way down there from my kid brother. And there I am up on the stage, and the curtain goes up, and the lights play on you. And out there in front was this lady. We had a lady from George Rogers Clark, who was a famous music choral director. And have you ever stood in front, have you ever been in a choir and watched one of these ladies work? They sing everything along with it. You know, they go, their voice goes up and down, and she was like some giant fish in front of us, moving up and down, and all I was doing was going zum, zum, zum. That's the one part she didn't sing. Zum, 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 way down in the church in the wildwood, zum, zum, wildwood, zum, zum. Well, that little victory of being picked for this thing, and the light shining. And that was really the first time in my life that I could honestly say that I was on a stage and the audience was out there. Now, most people, all of their lives, are in the audience and have never really been up on the stage. And it'll turn you. Oh, boy. It really turns you on. And then, probably the wildest feeling of all was to go home later, after this was all over, after the afternoon when we sang on the radio. It was actually recorded. That we were not live on the radio. We were up on the steps of the Civic Center, and it was one of those cold days, and we sang, and they picked it up, and they announced it would be on the radio that night at 8 o'clock. And then I remember listening to the radio. My mother and everybody, my mother called my Aunt Glenn. My Aunt Glenn called my Aunt Teresa. My Aunt Teresa called my Aunt Kate. And all over, they're all sitting there listening to the radio. And on it came at the Glee Club. To actually hear it on the radio. And I could hear myself. Or, I imagined I could anyway. I could hear zum, zum, zum. Well, that moment was a great moment of total victory. And they had a curious aftermath. I had been picked, the only one out of the Glee Club to make it in the all city high school chorus and Glee Club. And Eileen Akers flipped. I was suddenly in. Instead of just being, with the boys hitting each other. And curiously enough, I found that I didn't like Eileen Akers. Oh, you begin to throw your weight around. Well, that Christmas, that Glee Club Christmas, is still a legend in our family. In fact, as far as my mother is concerned, that's the only time that I really was on the radio. I'm serious. My mother, and they sent everybody, the radio station that we were on, sent everybody a recording, all the kids that were in this thing. They sent them a recording of this program that we did. And we did things like Silent Night, we three kings of Orient are, bearing gifts we traverse afar. We did that one. We did all the standard Christmas carols and so forth. But everybody got a record of this thing, and it was a big, 78. And this is one of my mother's treasured, prized possessions. The time I was on the radio. Yeah, and she still has it. I remember a couple of years ago, I was talking to her. I said, "Hi, Ma." And it was Christmas time. I gave her a call home. I said, "Hi, Ma. How is it? How's everything going?" She says, "Oh, we've been playing the record. Do you remember the time you were on the radio?" I said, "Yes, Ma, I remember the time I was on the radio." She said, "Well, do you remember the time you were on the radio? We often talk about it. Aunt Glenn says she remembers how wonderful it was when you were on the radio. And we've been playing your record for Christmas." Keep on remembering. And one time, I was in the Army, out of the Army, years later, walking down the street. and it was a cold winter day. I've just gotten out of the Army, and who do I meet coming down the street looking exactly like she always looked? Miss Norton. Miss Norton, who had been the principal of the school. I had no idea she remembered me, because this is from grade school. I'm walking. She says, "Why, it's Gene Shepherd." I said, "Oh, yeah, hi." Because she was such a fantastic figure of authority. I mean, Miss Norton was the principal of the school. And I remember when she would get up on the stage, you could hear her girdle creaking. She was, boy, a tough lady, had this iron gray hair. And so I said, "Hello, Miss Norton." She said, "Why, you've grown." Yeah, I did. Yeah, that's true. Well, you know how it is. I was only 3 feet tall when I was in Miss Robinette's. I guess I grew a little bit now. And she says, "Well, you certainly have. You know, I often talk about you." She says, "It would be nice if you had come to school and talked to all the children in the Glee Club." I said, "Talk to the kids?" It was practically out of my mind. I said, "Talk to the kids in the Glee Club?" She says, "Yes, you were such a fine singer." She said, "I often wondered why you didn't do anything with your singing." Well, she hit me right where I lived. I'll tell you, it's not often that somebody says, "Do something with your singing." I said, "Well, you know how it is. I play the Jew's harp a little bit, and I tap dance a little, but I haven't." She says, "Why don't you come tomorrow afternoon and talk to the children in the Glee Club?" Well, I did that. I don't think I've ever told this story. I have never told this story. And the next afternoon, it was just before Christmas, I went down to the Warren G. Harding School, which looked so tiny then. Miss Norton was still principal, and I went to the office where she was. And I walked in and I said, "Miss Norton, I'm here. Were you serious about your invitation?" She said, "Oh, I'm so pleased." She said, "Oh, Miss Robinette will be pleased to see you again." And sure enough, 5 minutes later, there is Miss Robinette. I never knew she was such a little lady. I always thought she was big, And here's Miss Robinette. She comes about up to my clavicle, and I'm looking down at her. And 5 minutes later, I'm in the gym, and here's a whole bunch of little kids sitting with their legs all crossed, looking up at me. And Miss Norton says, "Boys and girls, we're very, very honored today to have somebody who was one of the best people we ever had in our Glee Club. And he was the only one ever picked from Warren G. Harding School to be on the All-City Choir and Glee Club. And here he is, and I'm sure that all of you would like to hear him sing or talk to you and tell you about how it was on the Glee Club. Would you please talk?" And this is Gene Shepherd, who went to the Warren Harding School. I looked down at these little kids. They were all little kids, all sitting there. And I could see a couple of kids were still hitting each other in the back, There was another Schwartz and another Flick and another Shepherd coming up, And I looked down, I says, "All right, now come on, cut it out in the back there." I said, "Now cut it out." And they all looked up at me. I said, "Miss Norton," "Miss Norton, would you please step to the piano?" She said, "Why, I'd be pleased to." And she sat down at the piano. I said, "Miss Norton, would you please play, the one?" And she said, "Why, of course I know the one." And so she starts to play the lead melody. "Can you bake a cherry pie? Da, 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 da." And I'm going, "Zum, zum, 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 zum." And all the kids are watching me, and I can see 5 or 6 of the basses are applauding. They've got other kids. And then we stopped after the number, and there was a tremendous roar of applause. And I said, "Kids, if you practice hard, and if you gargle with Listerine regularly, and if you do push-ups, and you listen to what Miss Norton says, you too will grow up and be famous. Maybe you'll get picked on the All-City Choir and Glee Club." And I just want to tell you that it's good to be here, back at the Warren G. Harding School. all the kids looked at me, with that fantastic generation gap, their mouths hanging open. Who is this klutz? I still had on my Army field jacket. So work hard, practice, kid. You never know when you might make it to the big time.
You've been listening to Gene Shepard, humorist, author, and recipient of the Mark Twain Award for 1976.